tragically awkward and unpopular young lesbian comes face to face with her sexy cheerleader crush at the back-to-school fair, and, with an embarrassing tip of an invisible hat, launches into what is supposed to be flirtatious appreciation, but transforms instead into a rambling flood of awkward allusions to her love object's disordered eating. A self-proclaimed lesbian fuckboy callously tries to move her things out of her unwitting girlfriend's apartment, but is caught in the act and waylaid by her sobbing ex, who desperately works to unscrew their favorite dildo from the wall, all while their not-so-beloved chihuahua gratingly barks and leaps in the background. In a worn cut-off t-shirt and faded jeans, a greasy-haired, down-on-her-luck Kristen Stewart edges closer to her femme fatale bodybuilder paramour and offers a gift of sort of free steroid injections in a sweet and twisted attempt at seduction. The first step on the lover's dark path toward the film's surreal denouement, a climactic, campy attack of the 50-foot lesbian that just might herald a new queer cinema for the post-pandemic age. These aren't just lesbians behaving badly. These are lesbians, brought to the screen by queer filmmakers in the last year or so, who are, one might argue, working to reshape film history and even LGBTQ representation more broadly. Once upon a time, in the distant celluloid closet of a bygone era, one would only get a glimpse of the spectral lesbian. Just at the margins, in one's peripheral vision, or so opaquely coded that she barely registers at all. Blink, and you would miss the waspish Mrs. Danvers stroking her dead Rebecca's perfectly preserved underclothes. Fail to catch the meaning of the lingering gaze and hand clasp with her female protege and young man with the horn, and Lauren Bacall's unspecified neurotic sickness could remain unnamed and unknowable. One could watch Touch of Evil countless times and still fail to see the predatory queer Mercedes McCambridge at the edge of the pack of jackals, watching the assault on Janet Leigh. We all may know that a film's sadistic prison matron, its vampire queen, or its old maid in tweed, is a queer fish. But to name her as lesbian, even in her dimly figured manifestations, once seemed impossible, as if naming her so would bring her into some irreversible, unconscionable materiality. Of course, as the production code lost out to the sexual revolution, the so-called love that dare not speak its name started to be spoken, although usually, for its miserable queers, with tragic results or a punishing, retributive end. Controlling and pathetic butch Sisters George did make way for Ice Queen predators refined by the likes of Sharon Stone, or even for the occasional lesbian chic mob heist duo. But still, these lethal, lecherous, or love-sick lesbians were few and far between, through to the end of the 20th century. More recently, however, we have become accustomed to periodic, breathless press announcements of a new moment for lesbian representation in modern media. Although these moments never seem to amount to more than a handful of films and pass as quickly into memory as they seem to emerge onto the scene. Case in point, consider the spate of recent lesbian period dramas beginning with Todd Haynes' Carol in 2015 and ending, almost self-mockingly, with Frances Lee's claustrophobic Ammonite in 2020. Described by one festival programmer as the Lesbian Saints era, one cannot fault the quality or sincerity of these films. Haynes' exquisite Carol giving way to Park Chan-wook's The Handmaiden in 2016, followed by BAFTA and Academy Award darling The Favorite in 2018, and Portrait of a Lady on Fire, The World to Come, and Ammonite shortly thereafter. Yet, their period and atmosphere-drenched contemplations of forbidden longing made them ripe for objections to all too familiar portrayals of sexless lesbians, and then prey to the easy slap of an SNL spoof, titled, of course, Lesbian Period Drama, which asks archly, with the help of actress Carey Mulligan and queer paragon Kate McKinnon, will these lesbians be lesbians together? At the heart of that Saturday Night Live ribbing, however, lies a kernel of truth with historical underpinnings that we should not ignore. Since at least the early 70s, the idea of the lesbian in mainstream American public imagination has been wed to a very particular character or persona. The overly serious, unfunny, politically rigid and self-righteous feminist killjoy, to use Sara Ahmed's influential term. She's the stick-in-the-mud politico, modeled on radical lesbian feminists of the second wave, who lives and breathes her gender and sexuality-based activism every moment of every day. She has no style, she has no fun, she might not even be having any sex. As the underside of joy, her killjoy identity for Ahmed marks her as a major cause of unhappiness, one that we are encouraged to gladly leave behind in the dustbin of history, as liberated and apparently limitless queerness blazes a new utopian future. She looms large in queer cinema history in major works like Barbara Hammer's Dyke Tactics or Lizzie Borden's dystopic Born in Flames. She is gently ridiculed, but also adored, in new queer cinema hits like Rose Troche's Go Fish, and even in other major cultural touchstones like Alison Bechdel's groundbreaking comic Dykes to Watch Out For. But she is never not center stage. When critics and commentators wring their hands over an imminent death of the lesbian, as Mairead Sullivan so eloquently examines, this is the lesbian they mourn, or, conversely, wish to disappear. And for the group of recent films with which we began, namely Bottoms, Drive Away Dolls, and Love Lies Bleeding, her absence or ridicule is perhaps their most notable feature. Instead, the women who love women in this very recent new wave of films lean into their own ridiculousness and bad behavior. They are politically incorrect, shameless and ironic, a little silly, and maybe even amoral. No lesbian period drama or purist politicos here. Sex is on their minds and definitely on the screen. And if there is any seriousness, it is mocked, cast aside, or distorted into a surreal absurdity. The jacked-up 50-foot lesbian as destroyer and hero. They are, in truth, an inverted image of the dreary lesbian feminist killjoy. A bizarro world lesbian of camp spectacle and camp sensibility. But these new lesbian camps, or camp films centered on lesbians, have not emerged from the ether ex nihilo, or merely in response to decades of sexless longing or feminist crusading on screen. They have their own lengthy and magnificent lineage, a camp history of spectacle and lesbian-identified or lesbian-directed absurdity and humor. While Jamie Babbitt's now adored 1999 cult classic But I'm a Cheerleader obviously serves as a significant influence on these new films, particularly Bottoms and Drive Away Dolls, one should not discount the impact of other queer film festival and retrospective favorites, like Cheryl Dunye's tongue firmly in cheek romantic comedy Watermelon Woman, or the schlock B-film guilty pleasures of 1970s lesploitation. The lesbian pirates of Madame X Absolute Ruler, the besequined vampires of Daughters of Darkness, and of course, the abusive prison matron and dangerous malls of Jonathan Demme's Caged Heat. In these new films, there are glimmers of the wicked and unmerciful camp of John Waters, of the outrageousness and failures of Jacqueline Suzanne's Valley of the Dolls, and of the generic artificiality, exaggerations, and self-aware humor of the Batmans, Beverly Hillbillies, and Bewitchings of 1960s camp TV. In other words, lesbian camp on screen is hardly new, and not nearly as rare as we have been led to believe. Indeed, there is a glorious, if largely unrecognized, tradition of lesbian camp extending through the 20th century that these recent films bring back into view in the 21st. The films, and moreover adjacent multi-hyphenate performers like Janelle Monáe and the aforementioned McKinnon, harken back to daring lesbian camps of yesteryear. The outrageous and acerbic tongue and sexual exploits of stage film and radio doyenne Tallulah Bankhead, the ribald and gender-defying performances of Harlem legend Gladys Bentley, and the parodic camp productions of the five lesbian brothers at the groundbreaking Wow Cafe in New York at the end of the millennium. Example 1. In the hilarious but vicious satire of Emma Seligman and Rachel Sennett's Bottoms, this long tradition of ironic, subversive, and wickedly playful lesbian humor reemerges in the film's knowing blend of over-the-top teen exploits, shameful and shameless punchlines, and the relentless self-mockery of its, quote, ugly, untalented gays. The film's apparently unlovable lesbian losers, PJ and Josie, use the pretense of feminist solidarity to form a fight club just to get some cooch, as the club's hilarious advisor Mr. G would say, lying, cheating, and manipulating the sisterhood and their potential love interests merely to ensure that they aren't the only girl virgins at Sarah Lawrence next year. Teenage feminist killjoys of an entirely different sort, ones that actually kill and blow shit up, these lethal young lesbians get the laughs and the girls, while also finding a moment or two to send up the infamous betrayals of Western feminism's second wave. Then, in an entirely different vein, Drive-Away Dolls and Love Lies Bleeding pay homage to one of the most venerated and significant traditions of queer camp, the overheated, hysterically melodramatic, and shameful guilty pleasures of lesbian pulp fiction. Much more successfully than Drive-Away Dolls, which plays its exaggerated humor and self-consciousness so broadly that its failure results in an unintentional camp splendor, Rose Glass's gritty, neon-infused Love Lies Bleeding proves to be the lesbian camp Coen Brothers film that Ethan Coen himself seemed to struggle to make. Like a fever dream 80s synth-pop union of The Price of Salt and The Talented Mr. Ripley, with a strong dose of Highsmith's one-time lover Mary Jane Meeker's lesbian pulp melodrama peppered in, Glass's neo-noir body horror thriller seems to have it both ways, turning on the audience with its frenetic sexual appetite and grotesque violence, while also brilliantly camping up its source material and the period. In other words, it is the doomed lesbian lover blood-simple blue velvet mashup that we didn't realize we needed. From its opening Schwarzenegger send-up, replete with glistening nipples pumping iron and an electronic score straight out of the Terminator, to the outstanding greasy mullet and wig competition entered into by its leads, Love Lies Bleeding establishes a camp pedigree long before one becomes attuned to Kristen Stewart's knowing, ironic line readings. "I fucking love you, you idiot," has even been made into stickers by rapturous fans. Placing its two tragic macho sluts at the heart of a grisly 80s grindhouse thriller, the film trades in a dark humor indeed, ultimately, and ridiculously, bringing lesbian camp to colossal proportions. A sequined giantess Wonder Woman and her lover escaping into the pink clouds of the New Mexico desert. Finally, the obvious question left to ask, of course, is, are these films just glorious exceptions, or a new artistic rule? Does their particular camp humor and biting sensibility herald a new epoch of queer cinema? Or will it pass as just another lesbian moment in recent film history? A lesbian sinners era to follow those sighing lesbian saints? The historical record suggests that this particular brand of uniting pain and mockery, love and shame, subversive absurdities and shocking realities has always been with us. Perhaps all we can do then is hope that it is here to stay.